Welcome to No Tourists Allowed, a podcast where two travel industry executives with a combined 71 years on the inside of travel and technology give up their secrets to do the thing everyone wants to do. Travel better, pay less, and see more of the world. Here are your hosts, Mike Putman and James Ferrara.
Good day, everyone. I'm Mike Putman.
And I'm James Ferrara. Welcome to No Tourists Allowed. Is that true, Mike? Is that what everyone wants to do?
Travel
the world?
more. Yeah, pay less. I think so. A lot of people do.
I think I agree. So,
I would bet my career on it. How about that?
I once looked at some research about incentive programs. And, you can give away cash, you can give away cars, you can give away. Travel is always the number one motivator for incentive programs.
And you know why, right?
Why?
It's the long tail, right? So if you give someone $1,000, they're gonna what is that person gonna do with $1,000?
Spend it.
Well, they're probably gonna pay bills, right? If maybe it needs to be more substantial than 1,000, but they're gonna pay bills, and that has a very short. I forget. There's a psychological term for it, but it's a positive enhancement. Whereas if you give someone the gift of travel, you have three phases. You have you get the travel, you plan the travel, you're looking forward to the travel, then you take the travel, kind of phase two. And then after the travel, you still have these beautiful memories and photographs and so forth. So it's just, it is a more valuable, it's a better return on investment than giving away cash, even if you spend the same amount of money.
Well, we could sound like a bunch of Cadillac salesmen sitting here talking about how great Cadillacs are, but this is true. What we're saying, even though we are travel professionals and we've chosen to base our lives on this, it is true that travel is, amongst the most satisfying things on this earth.
Exactly. And nothing against Cadillac salespeople either. I'd rather sell travel.
Let's get a Cadillac endorsement on this.
Yeah. Well, James, have you ever raw dogged a flight?
Oh my gosh, this is a family show. I don't know if we should be talking like that. I have not, but I've read about this recently. Why don't we explain to the peeps what we mean?
Yeah. So there is a very popular trend, actually so popular, our producer, young Nathaniel DeSantis, gave us a little bit of insight on it earlier in our pre-production call. But it's this concept of going on a long flight and doing nothing. So I know it sounds a lot more grotesque or whatever, but it's raw dogging is going on a 4-hour, 5-hour, 9-hour, 15-hour flight and not looking at your phone, not listening or watching videos, and in a lot of cases, not eating or drinking, nor going to the bathroom, but just sitting in your seat looking straight ahead.
I mean, this is an actual trend. I've seen it on TikTok and whatever. And I have just one question. One question. Why? Why would you do that to yourself?
Well, a lot of people say that it is a great mind cleanser. That you come back after doing this so relaxed, so refreshed. You've got 7 hours just to or whatever the period of time is, just to think about what it is you're doing. And I also think too, to some degree, it's a badge of accomplishment for folks.
I mean, the collective stupidity of social media never ceases to amaze me. I just think this is a total waste of time.
There seems to be something there for some people. Maybe it's not for you. Maybe it's not for me.
Okay, meditate for a half hour, an hour even, go crazy. But why would you sit on a 9-hour flight and deny yourself sustenance, entertainment, mental exercise? Why?
One of the top footballers or soccer players in the world, Erling Haaland from Manchester City, he has a post, and his post is just raw dogged a 7-hour flight, no phone, no sleep, no water, no food, only looking at the map, the virtual map, as he was flying, I guess, back from back from the U.S. where they were doing a tour here back to England.
To me, this is what you do when something has gone wrong. You lost your backpack, you don't have your book, you don't have your phone, you got a seat with no TV. It's like when everything goes wrong, they ran out of food on the plane. When everything goes wrong, this is what you do.
Well, let's talk about some other trends that are going on in the travel business.
Hopefully, ones that make more sense.
To each his own. How about cool-cationing? We got a friend that just did this, by the way. So, as we're talking about climate change, and some believe there's climate change, others have not quite um, warmed up to the idea, pardon the pun. Um, you know, uh, Going to a cooler climate for your holiday in the peak summer times, especially when you live in really hot places like the Southeast or Florida or other places, is an idea. So you're kind of, it may seem a little bit counterculture, but for me, actually, I did this, and part of the reason I go to Scotland in July most every year is because I'm kind of over the heat, and I've kind of done with it. And so there's a real big trend right now of people taking their summer vacations, and these people might have been the same people going to the beach years ago or going to some tropical climate, are actually going to cooler destinations. Think Iceland. Think we talked about the Baltic cruise last week, James. Um, some of these things. So I think there's something to that trend. Something that this is one I can relate to and I can appreciate.
Yeah, Mike. Well, certainly if you're from North America, like you and I are, or I've heard other places like the UK too, maybe because of climate change, maybe because of variation in annual variation, but it's been a hot year. And so I think cool-cationing is really on people's minds because here in the New York area, it's been, in the 90s and humid and really tough. And also, we have offices down in Florida. I've heard the same from our folks in Florida. It's just been a really brutal spring and summer. So the idea of a cooler climate, you know, this year especially, has some attraction. But I like it. Sometimes we're in the mood to bundle up, right? I mean, I like my sweaters and my boots and there's a cozy feeling around it. So this is a good trend in my opinion.
Yeah, well, certainly a break, and a lot of people are doing it. Something else people are doing are what we call gig tripping. So, gig tripping is traveling to a destination, not necessarily for the destination, but for something that is event related, such as a music festival. It could be a sporting event. So we're seeing people do that a lot more, bigger trend with that this year. People doing sporting events and going to see Taylor Swift as an example, and then putting a vacation or extra days before or after around this.
It's also like leisure travel. This applies to business too. Sometimes I have to attend a conference or a meeting for business, but it's in a destination where I want to spend more time. And so you add on a couple of days or a trip to that, right?
Right, right. And the interesting thing too is a lot of these big music, these festivals that happen, every year, like Glastonbury as an example, happen kind of off the beaten path, right? So it's getting travelers to a new destination. You might not, you're going to the UK, but you're not going into London per se. You're going to Glastonbury, to see this big music festival. Which, by the way, if any of you are big popular music lovers, that's one of the biggest events in the globe, and it happens every year. So that's a good one to go to. And then we're also seeing, some travel companies get really creative. Some smart guys who are noticing this trend, and they're putting together VIP packages around some of these festivals. So more than just go here, get a ticket, go in there and sit down, but like backstage passes, meet and greet.
VIP tents, things like that.
So there's definitely an opportunity in the travel space to do some of those things if you can get access.
At our company, we work with a lot of those kinds of packages. They're specialty providers, and there's some good advice there. And there are pitfalls to watch out for. You want to make sure you're working with very reputable providers who actually have the tickets that they claim they have, and you want to see proof of those tickets because there are less reputable operators who will promise the tickets and get you committed to the package only to find out later that they can't get the seats, so there's some tricks to that trade, but we do sell a lot of it, and it's clearly a trend. I've been looking at some industry reports in the last few months. This is definitely the year of people moving around to attend exciting sporting events or exciting concerts, hard to get tickets, and people are moving around the world in a way that we haven't seen before for this reason.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Another thing, when I have people ask me, when should I go to Europe or when should I go to the Caribbean? Um, you know, it, I often talk about shoulder season travel. And just to give our listeners who might not know, shoulder season, and it varies by destination, but just kind of in general from North America, if you're talking about Europe, um, the peak season is usually around Easter, so around April 15th, and that goes through, call it end of September. And that is the peak season. And in the travel business, there are generally three what we call seasons. And that's when demand is highest. You're going to pay the highest for your airline tickets. You're going to pay the highest for your summer. It's because people want to go. People want to take their kids during the summer to Europe. The weather is typically better. It's just a nicer place to go. However, if you travel in the shoulder season, and for Europe, there's two shoulder seasons. So when high season ends, and let's just call it end of September, and this varies a little bit from year to year, but let's just call it October 1st. From October 1st until December 15th is a shoulder season or shoulder period. And that you will find airfares typically go down significantly, not to the lowest points of the year, but to a very low point. And I'm going over to Italy in October, and I happened to be looking at airfares yesterday and getting into even Naples, which is a smaller area, which going from a smaller, less traffic area from here, which might be Charlotte, to Naples, they had airfares for $799, that low. So, which during the summertime that would have been $1,200 or $1,300, just to give our listeners a perspective. So you have that period, and then between December 15th and the end of March, excluding the holiday period. So if you take December 15th to the end of March, and you take out, a week before Christmas and probably 2 weeks after Christmas, those are holiday seasons, then that is what is considered the low season. So there you can travel at Europe's least expensive point. And then there's yet another shoulder season between March 31st and I said April 15th earlier. I meant May 15th to May 15th. That's when the shoulder season typically is for Europe. And then, for the Caribbean, it's kind of almost the opposite of that because people, especially the snowbirds up north, get cold and they want to get out of the snow. So they'll pay a premium to come down to the Caribbean in the wintertime. And so that becomes their high season. So the point simply is, if you don't have to have the very best weather, and as James said, there's something to be said about traveling where you wear sweaters and coats, and nobody wants to go probably when it's sleeting or really terrible weather. But if you take a little bit off and can move your travel times to the shoulder season, you're going to save some very significant money. You're going to have less crowds. You're going to have more access to things.
Yeah, the truth is that some places have their charm, right? Even in what you might consider the off season. And one of the places I think of often is the ski resorts like Aspen or Park City, Utah. You can go in the summertime to those places, and there are arts festivals and music festivals, and it's really beautiful. The weather's really beautiful and sunny, and they're very attractive places to go out, even outside the season that you might first think of them, like wintertime for ski. And that's true of Europe too. I've been to Paris and London in the wintertime, and it's beautiful in its own way. And certainly the the fewer people, the lack of crowds makes things, can make things a lot more enjoyable. You can get in to see things that we can get theater tickets or museum shows that were harder to do during the high season, sometimes impossible. Um, Restaurant reservations and so on. But I love Paris on a gray, chilly day. You know,
Yeah. Well, I'm the same way about London. I enjoy going in the winter, with the exception of it getting dark so early. But for the other parts of it, I really do like.
and Christmas holidays are fun in other countries. So, you go to Germany and Austria, that's really where our concept of Christmas in the United States comes from, is out of that tradition in Germany and Austria. When you look at old Christmas cards and stuff, that's really what's being depicted. Oh, Tannenbaum. So beautiful place to be at Christmas time. London's a great place to be at Christmas time, to see all the decorations and participate in all the festivities. So I think be open to these other seasons. We really shouldn't call them off season, high season, whatever. They're just other seasons.
Other seasons that are a lot less expensive. And you'll find during the low seasons too, from the East Coast to Europe, you might find airfares for $500, $600 trip. Um, and the reason being, these airlines are required contractually to keep routes flying. So, as part of getting a spot at, let's say, Heathrow, as an example, they have to commit to doing that year round. They can't just do it when it's highly profitable in the summer. They can charge more. They have to service those routes year round. So, the planes are going to fly, and they're going to do whatever they've got to do to motivate you to get on the planes. And same with hotels. Hotels, if they're empty, they're not making any money. So they're going to incentivize you, and there's some very great bargains during the low season or the off season.
What other trends do we have?
There's a lot of people that are doing longer stays now. So, listen, I've gone to Europe, I would bet 10 times for 3 or 4 nights. And either for business and sometimes even for pleasure in my younger days. It kind of puts a beating on my body now, so I'm not quite sure I would do it as much now. But what I have begun doing, and what I know a lot of other people have too, is go for more than 4 or 5 days, go for 10 days, 14 days, whatever you can get away with. Because getting there is, if you're going to Europe specifically, you're going to lose a full day from the East Coast, full day from the West Coast. And that's one of your days, right? And then you get there the next day and you're feeling probably not so great unless you flew in business class. So you got kind of a day of recovery. So that's 2 days. Then you got a flight back, which is another day. So count that 3 days. So if you go over there for a week, you're really only going to get 4 full days, maybe 5 full days of enjoyable time. So extend your stay. That's what a lot of people are doing this year. And especially because last year, in 2023, we had such a sharp increase in airfares because at that point we had really high demand, which we have now, but there were less equipment that were put back into service, and we still had some issues with the airlines not being fully functional in terms of all their employees back, because there was still that kind of hiring gap back from COVID.
I have a hard time relating to people who can take long, long trips because it's just not the reality of my life right now. I can't go away for 2 or 3 weeks because of my work, but I do, people who are retired or people who have different life situations, even people who work with me, like Jessica D, who's been our deals guru on this podcast in earlier seasons. Um, she's a millennial, and she travels in a very adventurous way. She's off to Jordan and Morocco and places. Now she's going off to, I think, Thailand and Vietnam. And her trips are minimum like 2 weeks at a time because of the travel to get there and the kinds of travel that she's doing, this adventurous travel out in sort of remote areas. You can't go and come back in a week, and so I get it. It's not travel that I'm able to do. I'm happy to see that there's a trend towards it because I think, it probably stands, Mike, that you get a deeper experience the more time you spend, right? So I think people are having more meaningful travels that way if you can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. You can get further off the beaten path the longer you're there, and really kind of get into the culture and the flow of things, and kind of the lifestyle. So, yeah, if you can, definitely do it. We're also seeing a big rise in train travel this year. There's a lot of people who've kind of taken up train travel for different reasons. Specifically in Europe and it's somewhat in Asia. But train travel, we've talked about it many times on the show. Better for the environment. It's a better way to travel in Europe, even if you compare it to airfares, because you're going from city center to city center. You're not going to, take a cab 30 minutes out of the city center to go to an airport, fly to Paris, where you're another 30 minutes or 45 minutes to the city center. You take a train, using London as an example, you get on at St. Pancras and you get off at Paris Nord, which is, where the Eurostar goes. So, and you're right in the middle of a city in both examples. So a big push for train travel, and there's a lot of new trains coming, a lot of new train technology that continues to come on board, as well as more trains and more service, and so a lot of people this year have been utilizing trains more often.
Those high-speed trains in other countries, not in the United States, unfortunately, but in other countries, make things very accessible. Also, we work with a great company called Rail Bookers. They used to be called Yankee Holidays here in the United States, but they're a global company. We do a lot of work with them in the UK and now in the US and Canada. And they package rail trips with hotels, as you're saying, sort of leisure packages built around trains. And they're excellent at it. And you work through your travel agent to get to them. And they're very popular. In the States and in Canada, what we have are some really cool specialty rail experiences, like Rocky Mountaineer in the Canadian and the US Rockies, where you can spend several days on trains designed for overnight stays, kind of like the Orient Express in Europe, but here in the United States. There's a beautiful scenic railway in Mexico called Copper Canyon Railway. There is the rail journey in Alaska out to Denali National Park. So you pair that beautiful transportation on the train with these observation cars, like all glass cars. You see the incredible scenery, and then you wind up in Denali National Park, and you can stay in one of the lodges there for, people stay for a week. I mean, there's so much to see and do there. So we do have some like specialty trains here in North America that make for beautiful trips, as opposed to just, like Amtrak, which is a lot of things, but it's not beautiful.
Maybe inexpensive, but not beautiful. So there's a lot of talk too, James, about slow travel being a trend this year. There's a lot of people who are um, utilize this tag "slow life" when they're posting to social media, and actually that has spiked this year. That tag "slow life," and a lot of people have now incorporated that into their travel, and they're calling it slow travel. And the concept is, rather than having a jam-packed itinerary where I've got to be somewhere every day and doing something, you know, put days or half days slots in there where you can just sleep in, not get up at 11 o'clock and have brunch type thing. So that looks like it's a trend, specifically with the Gen Zs and the millennials, which is probably closer to their lifestyle back at home.
Gen Zs stay in bed a lot anyway, but I I have a hard time relating to this one too. Although I do think it's probably very healthy and sounds very nice. For me, I tend to drive myself even more when I'm on vacation, right? Because I've gone through the trouble and expense of getting to somewhere. I usually feel a little uh, time poverty, like I have a limited amount of time in this location. So I want to do as much as I can, see as much as I can. And that has its rewards, you get to experience a lot, but it has its costs too. Sometimes I'm exhausted from my vacation. Sometimes you overdo it, right? So the idea of slow travel, has its appeal. Um, and maybe it means that you are not running around chasing the tourist things. We talk about that a lot here at No Tourists Allowed. But instead, you're going for walks. You're hanging out at a local sidewalk cafe for hours, nursing a couple of espressos or a cocktail or something, and just watching the world go by, right? That kind of travel, I think, sounds good.
I would say the opposite of slow travel is dad travel. I remember growing as a travel brat. We would all, my sister and I, and my mom and dad would go somewhere exotic, or at least at that time exotic. And he would be up at 6 o'clock, pacing back and forth in the room, just waiting for everybody, not wanting to wake anyone up, but just waiting for everybody to get up. He would have his maps out, have everything planned, ready to go. He was so excited. So, opposite of slow travel, dad travel.
Yeah, you had a gentle dad. My father, we were kids. So as kids, you stay in bed, especially like in the summertime, you're staying up late, you're in bed till noon. My father would have none of that on a trip. And he actually used to take, it's going to sound terrible. He was a nice man, I promise you. But he used to take the ice bucket in the hotel room and throw ice water on us in the bed to make us get up in the morning.
Yeah. Well, when I say sleep in, I meant like he'll let us sleep until 8 a.m. That's kind of. So I wanted to also share with our listeners and viewers a special of the week. So for those of you in the UK, this is probably a little more achievable. For those of you in the US, this might be something you want to consider if you're heading over to the UK. Rick Stein, who is a very popular chef in the UK, and he's had a lot of he's built his really reputation by being a traveling chef, and he's had these multiple series of shows, some of which or all of which I really enjoy because he spends time traveling and then cooking the cultural foods that they have in destination. And he's kind of like an Anthony Bourdain without all the rough edges, a little more proper, but kind of that type of person. But he has several places in Cornwall, but he's got a special going, which is a fantastic deal. I happened to go there earlier this summer, um, even though I had to pay full price. Uh, but he has a couple of hotels in Padstow, which is in Cornwall, and they're offering a great deal between the 29th of September and the 2nd of November. It's 147 pounds per person per night. So that turns out to 147 would be, call it $175 per person per night. And with that, you get to stay in his one of his properties. And I stayed at the hotel, which is called the Seafood Restaurant, which is odd because it is a restaurant, but it's a hotel named the Seafood Restaurant. He's got 40 rooms there, and it includes a beautiful room. And these are like really, really high end 5-star hotel rooms. It includes a unbelievable cooked breakfast and breakfast buffet, which is just great, and a 3-course dinner each night. And he has 3 different restaurants in Padstow, so you can choose which one you would like to go to. But I can tell you the 3-course dinner would be valued at, a little over 100 pounds. So, or close to 100 pounds, I should say. So it's a great deal. 2-night stay minimum, 147 pounds at Rick Stein's Padstow property in Cornwall. So call if you're interested. Reach out to your travel advisor and have them book that for you. It's a really good property, and I'm sure you will enjoy it. It's this beautiful little scenic harbor town on the southwest part of England.
Sounds great.
Yeah, you do enjoy it. So that was all that I had today, James. Do you have anything?
No, except that I have seen a bit more coverage of these people misbehaving on planes lately. I don't know if you've noticed this. It seems like it's ticked up again, where people are just behaving abominably on planes and having to be removed and upsetting other passengers. And we've talked about it before. During the pandemic, it became a problem, but there was a little bit of an excuse, right? People's mental health was challenged a bit during the pandemic. I don't know what the excuse is now, except that culturally, we've all become bratty, as you said earlier. And I think that we really need to look at ourselves and ask if we are behaving like emotionally developed people. I just see these, and now everything gets filmed and put on Instagram or TikTok. So now you really see it. But I think in general, let's ask our no tourists allowed audience to pledge to themselves that as they travel around the world, they'll be their best selves. We've talked about that as part of our kind of manifesto of how to be a modern, enlightened traveler. And I think it's specifically true now with air travel. That seems to be the problem, right?
Yeah.
And so that tells you that part of it is the stress of that experience of going through an airport, the security people, the crowds, maybe the way we're treated by airport and airline staff. I'm not going to give them a free pass.
Right.
Even so, we should, for all our sakes, try to be our best selves.
Yeah. I do think there has been a change in the industry as there, especially with the airport staff, the airline staff, and I'm not talking about security. I think security has gotten much better and much friendlier too, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
They did have some kind of Barney Fives, and originally that wanted to show their muscle. But I think most of that's gone away. But the challenging part is you have a lot of airline employees that are not properly trained, number one. And number two, they're not given the tools to succeed. And they say things like, my system says it can't be done. Even when something happens that makes no logical sense, or, and they don't have a way of solving the problems. And I think that is a, entity level, and I would even say an industry level issue. One of the great companies of the world, Ritz-Carlton, empowers all of its employees, including their housekeepers, etc. If they see something that where a guest is not happy, they can spend up to $250 to make it right for that guest. So if a guest is having a bad day, believe it or not, a cleaning lady can go say, let me buy you dinner in the restaurant tonight. Here's a $200, $250. I'm going to have a $250 gift card sent to your room, that type of thing. Now, that's kind of over the top. That kind of swings the pendulum really far. But this idea that airline people just can't help you, won't help you, and they say, my system doesn't allow me to do it. It's like the people at the cash register at the supermarket. You say, these bananas were 59 cents a pound, and they go, no, I just scanned it through here, 79 cents. And what are you going to do? You're going to stop and argue with them or go back and take a picture of 59-cent sign? It's just some of that unempowered stuff that it because it lacks people really caring. So I think that's what it shows, but also more training. And I think people get upset. Again, to your point, there's no excuse to behave where you go over the top and stuff. There's a way to get things resolved. It just may not be at that moment.
I do think we ought to call out when we see improvement too, in order to encourage it, right? And so I have seen this. I'm a big United flyer, and I have seen in the last year a real change in attitude from the crew on United flights and the gate agents, and it's clearly the result of some retraining. Where they have been much warmer, much more welcoming, much more, problem solving oriented, where it had gotten to the point for me where they felt like prison guards to me, the way they were barking at passengers and being belligerent and that has totally changed. So I think there are companies, in my case, it's United, maybe there are others, who see the sense of it, who maybe got a real taste during the pandemic and decided to do something about it. Maybe it's just about de-escalating some of these blowups with passengers, so they realize that there's an opportunity in the behavior of the crew to kind of de-escalate these situations. Whatever the reason, it's having an effect, and it's changing the experience for me, and I hope for everyone else too.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening to another edition of No Tourists Allowed. If you have any suggestions or questions you would like for us to answer on air, please go to notouristallowed.com and share those thoughts, and we'll be glad to answer you or maybe even bring your question or thought or suggestion up on one of our future podcasts.
Absolutely. And stay with us the beginning of the fall when we start our next season. I don't know if it's on season, off season, shoulder season, but it's our next season in September. We'll come to you with another giveaway, right? So we just gave away an all-inclusive vacation in Jamaica. Before that, a Virgin Voyages luxury cruise for two. Let's see what September brings for those of you who, make it here and engage with us and listen now and then and sign up for our newsletter. There are free travels out there for you. So we'll see you again soon. Thank you so much.